Okay, so here we are at the next phase. It's been about 12 hours since we fed the starter. Remember, those are the proportions 1, 2, 2. And you can see it started out down here at this line on the jar, and now it's tripled. That's what you're looking for. It's tripled in size, and it's kind of pulling away, so you can kind of see that it's stringy is the word I like to use. Stringy and full of bubbles, as you can see there. That is what you're looking for. So what are some other supplies that you're going to need at this stage of the process? Well, you're going to need a bowl, a large bowl, in order to make the bread dough itself. So I just use a regular, I didn't buy anything special. This is just a serving bowl. You will need a scraper. I like to use a scraper because I don't like to get my hands all in the dough. So I do a method where I scrape, push, scrape, push, turn, scrape, push, turn. And I'll show you that in just a second. So I use a scraper because I don't want to put my hands all in it. But if you do, or if you are one of those people that you like putting your hands on the dough, you can. You'll also need a scale again. Now remember in the earlier I shared with you that the scale should be big enough that when you put a bowl like this on top of it, you can still see the gauge. You can still see the numbers and stuff, so you know what the weights are and stuff. You'll also need a good quality, high protein flour. Bread flour has a lot of protein in it. You know, because it tells you on the package. I think this one's like 13. So you just want a flour with a high amount of protein. That's what helps it to rise. And then you'll also need salt. Now I've tried this recipe with kosher salt, and I've also tried it with Himalayan pink salt. And I don't really have a preference. It's just whatever I have handy. Today we're going to use the pink Himalayan, and I use about 8 grams. So what I'm going to, and you'll also need something to put over the top of the bowl, and something that will allow it to breathe. So you want the dough to breathe so that it can, again, rise. So I use just a plain cotton dish towel, and I fold it in half like this, and I just lay it over the top. I also have taken the cotton dish towels and made bread bags out of them. Very simple process. This is a bread bag to store the bread in once it's been baked. So you will need water as part of the process. So I use any kind of water will work. People use tap water. I prefer to use water that's been filtered. Okay? And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we'll get going on the next step. So here we are, we're at the next phase, and I have my scale, and I have something to stir it up with. You could just use a fork if you want, either one will work. I have my bowl, and I'm just gonna set it on the scale. Now again, you wanna make sure, even though you can't see the numbers, they're right there. I can see them from my angle. So as you can see, I can see them right here. So I'm gonna quickly measure this out and show you what this looks like. So the first thing I'm going to add is I'm going to add 50 grams of starter. But first I'm going to turn on my scale. It's going to take into account the size of the bowl, and I'm going to make sure my units are set in grams. And then I'm going to pour off 50 grams of starter. Okay. And you can see it's nice and bubbly and just exactly what we're looking for. And I just want, like I said, 50 grams. And that's almost there. And it's kind of sticky, and that's what you're looking for. Okay? Okay. All right, doesn't have to be absolutely exact. I'm right at 51.3. That's perfect. Next thing I'm going to add is 350 grams of water. Now, I like to add distilled water, but you can add whatever. You could use tap water, bottled water. I just recommend that you make sure that whatever water you would drink is the kind of water that you're using in your recipe. Now I'm going to tear it out so it's no longer at 51, and it's going to set it back to 0. And then I'm going to add 350 grams of water. Okay. And that's 341, 353. Now, if it's a little off, I might take a spoon. If you want to be exact, if you're someone who likes it exact, I'll just take a little scoop off. That's a little too much. There we go. That's 350.3 in water. Close enough. So then I'm going to take my fork and I'm just going to stir up and loosen up all this starter so it's inside of, it's just kind of mixed in with the water. Now I'm not going to beat it. I'm just lightly stirring it in. Okay. Now, next thing we're going to want to do is now we want to add our flour. So I use this King Arthur organic bread flour, and I'm going to use a measuring cup. I'm not measuring with this. I'm just scooping with it. Now I'm going to tear out my scale again so it's back to 0. Even though it has water and starter and the bowl itself, I set it back to 0, and I'm going to add 500 grams of flour. So, and again, this is bread flour. I know people who use regular all-purpose flour. I have tried that. I just think that bread flour has more protein, and it just makes it, the dough just seems to do better in rising and developing. So I prefer to use the bread flour. And that's 500 right there, okay? So for one bag of flour, I can usually get 3 to 4 loaves of bread, roughly. So now what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna take it off the scale and turn it, whoop, we forgot one important ingredient, sorry. So I'm gonna add my salt. I like to add about 7 to 8 grams. I just love the sourness, and that's where it gets it. The sourness of the bread comes from the salt. So I'm just gonna pour that in, just a tad more. And you can see it doesn't take much to get to 8. And there we go. And then I'll close this, and I will move these things out of the way. And I am done with my scale. And here is the next step that I follow. So I'm gonna get this all incorporated and just kind of scoop around the flour. And this is where this great little tool comes in. So this is a scraper. And what I like to do is I basically swoosh and pull it back and push it in. And then turn, swoosh, pull back, push in. And turn the bowl again. And turn the bowl again. And all I'm trying to do is incorporate the flour and the water and the starter. This is easier to do than it is to say. So I turn, scoop, and push. Turn, scoop, and push. And I'll just keep doing that until everything is incorporated. Okay? And you can see it starts to look very ragged. This is what you're looking for. You don't want it to be smooth. It's supposed to look raggy like this. And you want to make sure that you get all the flour off the bottom. So you'll see I start really, when I push, I'm digging the piece in and I'm pushing from the bottom to try and get all that flour off the bottom. Okay? And I'm going to continue to scoop and push until everything is incorporated. Okay? All right. Okay. And you can see it's coming together pretty nicely. Okay. And I just keep scooping and pushing. And this is a stage where a lot of bread makers will use their hands. I'm just not one of those. I prefer to use I believe the name of this is a scraper. But I just push and scrape, and you can see I keep doing it. And then when I think I want to get this stuff off so it gets incorporated, and it comes off pretty easy. The dough is fairly sticky, but it's not so sticky that everything gets like gunked up. So this dough is supposed to be slightly sticky, but not so much so that you can't handle it. So, and you can see that I've got this nice raggy looking ball of dough. And then I'm just going to make sure that I've gotten all the flour off the bottom. And you can see that didn't take long at all to do all that. So, and I'll go through and make sure all of it's off the side. Now I prefer to use a bowl that's wider and tall, just slightly taller and slightly wider, but this is what I have handy right now. So if you've got a bigger bowl, by all means, please use it. Okay, so now that I've gotten it to this point, and it looks pretty good, it's ragged the way I want it to look, I'm going to cover it with my dish towel. I've doubled my dish towel over, and I just fold it over, and I'm going to set this near a source like the stove, not on the burners or anything. I don't want it to get too hot. Again, just like the starter, you don't want it to get too cold because it will take a lot longer to rise and process, but you also don't want to put it near a heat source where it could potentially kill the microbes so that they get overheated and then it doesn't rise at all. So too much heat or too much cold is not good for your dough. And that is the end of this particular segment of the sourdough making process. Thanks. Now that we have our sourdough, the next step is the waiting game. We're going to put this somewhere where it's not too cold, not too warm. I prefer to put mine on top of the stove top, and I turn on the overhead lights for the stove itself because they admit a little bit of warmth, and I'll leave it there for 1 hour. In an hour, I come back, and I'm going to do a series of turn, pull, and folds to start building up the gluten and the elasticity of the bread. See you back here in an hour.